I honestly don't even know why I'm posting this here, but I just need to get it out. Our heating bill for the house in Saratoga Springs has been absolutely insane lately. I've actually started wearing a fleece vest inside, which Mark hates, but whatever. The house is beautiful big porch, white siding, the whole thing, but it's just so drafty. No matter how high I crank the heat, the upstairs hallway is always freezing. I tried putting down a bunch of rugs to cover the floorboards, but it didn't really do anything. I work from home on Tuesday mornings in this tiny office I carved out of an old sewing room. I do digital marketing for a tech firm in Albany, which is basically just a fancy way of saying I spend 8 hours a day trying to make people care about software they don't actually need. It's kind of a joke. I'm an expert at making brands feel intimate for a living, but then I spend my evenings sitting across from my husband at the dinner table, and I feel like we aren't even speaking the same language anymore. Mark's a partner at his firm, so he handles the big picture. I handle literally everything else: the HOA deadlines, the 401k, making sure the gutters are clear before the first snow. I always told myself it was a partnership. If he brings in the big paycheck and I keep the wheels from falling off, I scaled back my own career in my 30s just to make sure the house ran smoothly. I thought that was my role, I was the glue. By 2 p.m. today, I was just bored. Like, physically exhausted from the boredom. I looked out the window and saw a neighbor arguing with a delivery driver about where a package was left. It was just some stupid suburban fight, but I found myself rooting for the driver. I just wanted anything to happen that wasn't a calendar invite or a budget meeting. Mark got home around 6:30, same as always. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and spent 20 minutes complaining about traffic on I-87 and some junior associate who couldn't format a slide deck. I just nodded and did the supportive spouse thing. Watching him in the kitchen, it hit me that he doesn't actually see me. I mean, he sees me physically, but that's it. He sees the person who keeps his favorite scotch stocked and handles the dry cleaning. I'm basically just a piece of the furniture. I tried to tell him I was thinking about getting a UX design certification to switch things up at work. I mentioned it while he was pouring wine. He didn't even look up. He just mumbled, "Yeah, cool," and asked if I'd seen his blue tie. I didn't even answer him. I stood there for a minute, holding a salad fork, and I felt this strange, cold feeling in my chest. It wasn't even some big epiphany. I was just done. I'm so tired of being the one who remembers everything while nobody remembers me. Later that night, Mark fell asleep. He breathed really heavy, that kind of sound a man makes when he has absolutely nothing to worry about. I couldn't sleep, so I decided to organize the guest room closet. It's basically where we dump everything: cold suitcases, a broken exercise bike, holiday boxes. I was looking for the property tax folders because I wanted to check something on the home equity line. I started digging through a plastic bin of office supplies, and it was full of these dried out markers and useless filing tabs. Mark hoards this stuff just in case, and it honestly drove me crazy that he can't just throw away a dead pen. I spent 5 minutes just tossing them into a trash bag, feeling way more angry about the pens than I should have been. Anyway, once I cleared that junk out, I moved a stack of old magazines. Behind them in the back corner, where the wood was warped from an old leak, I found this small black leather briefcase. It wasn't one of his work bags. His are all high-end and smell like cedar. This one was smaller, older, and scuffed up. No brand name. It looked like something he had in his 20s, or maybe something he bought specifically to hide things. I sat there on the carpet and the floor was freezing through my leggings. I remembered when we first moved in. It was October, and the leaves were that bright red you only see in upstate New York. We stood in the empty living room and talked about building a life here. He told me we'd always be a team. I looked at the briefcase. It had a simple 3-digit combination lock. Normally, I wouldn't have opened it. I'm the stable one. I follow the rules, but the house was too quiet and I just got curious. I tried the obvious stuff: our anniversary, his birthday, the last 3 digits of our old phone number. Nothing. Then I tried the date. We met the day he told me. He'd never met anyone who understood him like I did. The lock clicked. It was a tiny sound, but it felt huge. My heart started racing. I slowly lifted the lid. It wasn't money or a diary. It was a bunch of envelopes addressed to a woman I didn't recognize. There were a few photos, too. In them, Mark was laughing, leaning into a woman with dark curly hair. He looked younger, but not just because of the time. He looked lighter. He looked like a version of himself I hadn't seen in 15 years. I picked up one of the letters. The handwriting was looping and looked urgent. As I read the first few lines, I realized this wasn't some old flame from years ago. The dates on the envelopes were recent. Some were from last month. I just sat there on the dusty carpet, surrounded by dead markers and old magazines. I felt this strange, icy calm. I wondered how much of my life has just been a performance making everything look perfect, while the actual substance was gone. I closed the briefcase and put it back exactly where I found it. I stood up and walked out, closing the door softly. I just went back to the bedroom and lay there. I don't even know what to do now. Am I crazy for confronting him immediately? So I think my husband is leading a double life. I'm shaking while I write this, but I need to get it all down. The next morning was one of those miserable upstate New York autumn days. The house was freezing because Mason refuses to turn the heat up until it's actually snowing. I woke up before him and laid there staring at the ceiling. We spent a fortune on renovations a few years back. I remember fighting with him for 2 weeks over the paint color for the trim, and he won because he claimed he had a better eye for timelessness or some other arrogant stuff. Honestly, looking back, the color is slightly too beige. It's almost a yellowish beige that makes the room look like an old hospital waiting room if the light hits it wrong. I still hate it. I couldn't get back to sleep, so I went to make coffee. The house was quiet except for the fridge humming and this one drip from the faucet that I've been meaning to fix for 6 months. I stood there for a minute watching the pot fill up. Mason came down around 7:15. He was already in his suit, smelling like expensive cologne and peppermint. He looked exactly like the law partner he is, perfectly put together. He gave me a quick kiss on the forehead and reached for his coffee. I found the briefcase in the guest room closet, I told him. My voice was flat. I wasn't even looking at him. Mason stopped with the mug halfway to his face. He didn't freak out. He slowly lowered the cup and looked at me, trying to act concerned. "The briefcase?" he asked. "I don't know what you're talking about, Olivia. The black leather one, with the lock, and the letters to the woman with the curly hair." He sighed, like I was being a nuisance. He set his mug on the counter. It made this little clink and stepped closer. He had that look on his face, the one he uses when he thinks I'm being too emotional. "Olivia, why are you digging through the guest closet? Seriously, can't you respect my privacy? Even in a marriage, you can't snoop privacy?" I looked at him. "You have letters to another woman in a locked box in our house. Since when is that a privacy thing?" He didn't yell. He never yells. That's the worst part. He stays calm while I'm the one losing it. He leaned back against the counter and crossed his arms. "You've been so stressed lately. The work from home thing, the boredom. I think it's finally getting to you. You're looking for drama. Those are old letters, Olivia, from a long time ago. I kept them. The dates were recent, Mason. Some were from last month." "Wait, was it last month or was it August?" "No, it was definitely September." He laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. Just a short, condescending sound. "Recent? You probably misread the dates. Or you're imagining things. Honestly, I'm worried about you. Have you even been sleeping? You seem unstable. Maybe take a few days off before you do something embarrassing at work." That word unstably got to me. But I didn't say anything. I watched him. He wasn't even trying to make the lie believable. He figured I'd doubt myself because that's what's happened for the last 10 years. "I didn't misread the dates," I said, "right? Well, I can't argue with a fantasy," he said. His voice went back to that corporate tone. He checked his watch. "I have a 9 a.m. briefing. We can talk about this later, but you really need to think about why you felt the need to snoop." He grabbed his bag, gave me a fake smile, and left. I heard the garage door shut, and then it was quiet again. I didn't cry. I wasn't even angry. I felt this heavy pit in my stomach. I spent the morning in my office, but I wasn't actually working. I was staring at my laptop, thinking about our 401k and the joint accounts. Mason handles the big picture, but I'm the one who actually does the spreadsheets. I know all the passwords because he always forgets them and makes me reset them. I logged into the main checking account. Everything looked normal: mortgage, hoe fees, insurance. But then I saw the transfers, small weird withdrawals, maybe $500 to $2,000, going into an account I didn't recognize. They were labeled consulting expenses or client reimbursements, but Mason doesn't have clients who pay him back in random small amounts. I wanted to find the actual paperwork. I went to the filing cabinet in the hallway where the house deeds are. As I opened the bottom drawer, it got stuck, and I had to practically yank it. A bunch of old charging cables and tangled wires spilled all over the carpet. I spent like 10 minutes trying to untangle a microSD cable from some old iPhone cord that doesn't even work. I don't even know why he keeps this junk. I actually spent a few minutes just staring at a frayed cable from a digital camera we haven't owned since 2012. It's just so irritating that he can't throw things away. I got so annoyed that I shoved the whole mess into a trash bag. Anyway, once the cables were out of the way, I found the folder for the home equity line. I remembered in September, he mentioned needing liquidity for some investment, but he was vague about it. I looked through the docs and found a transfer for $40,000. He'd moved it into a private account 6 months ago. $40,000. I sat there on the floor. The hallway was drafty and my ankles were freezing. I thought about the promotion I turned down in my 30s because the travel would have been too much for the house. I thought about how I'd accepted his snoring and heavy breathing at night because it meant things were stable. It wasn't just the woman, he'd been keeping a whole separate stash of money. A secret world, while I was the one making sure the gutters were clean and the taxes were paid. I needed to know who she was. I went back to the guest room and opened the briefcase. I looked at the return address on one of the envelopes. A small apartment complex in Albany, not fancy, just a brick building near the university. I spent the afternoon driving. I didn't tell Mason I got in the car and headed south on I-87. The traffic was a nightmare, just a slow crawl of trucks. I spent 20 minutes staring at the back of a rusted-out Ford F-150. The driver had one of those tacky plastic fishing lures hanging from his rearview mirror that kept swinging back and forth. It was distracting as hell. I stopped at a Target in Albany to buy a legal pad and some pens, mostly to have something to do with my hands. I walked through the aisles looking at home decor, and I saw couples shopping together, and wondered how many of them were lying to each other. I drove to the address. It was a quiet street with those big maple trees and orange leaves everywhere. I parked a block away and walked. I didn't really have a plan. I didn't even know if I wanted to talk to her. I wanted to see where he'd been spending his consulting time. The building was boring. It had a buzzer and a hallway that smelled like old cooking oil and floor wax. I stood there for a long time looking at the mailboxes. I found the unit number, no name on the box, just the number. As I was leaving, a woman walked out, dark curly hair, wearing a simple olive green dress. She looked a bit younger than me. She looked happy. She didn't see me. She was on her phone, laughing at something. I stayed in the shadow of the entryway and watched her walk to her car. I could have stepped out. I could have screamed or asked how much of our money she'd spent, but I didn't. I watched her drive away. I realized Mason thought I was unstable. He thought I was some bored housewife he could shut down with a few condescending words. I went back to my car and opened the legal pad. I didn't write a diary entry, I started a list. I drove back to Saratoga in silence. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the porch lights were on. I walked inside. Mason was in the living room, reading a brief and drinking scotch. He looked up and gave me that fake supportive smile. "Feel better, Olivia? Did you get some fresh air?" "I did," I said, walking past him. "I feel much better." I started making dinner. I was quiet. I didn't tell him about Albany or the legal pad. I chopped the vegetables and boiled the water. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it yet, but I was done. I put the plates on the table and sat down. He started talking about a new case, his voice all confident and loud. I nodded and ate my dinner. The heating system in the house started making this clicking noise a few days later. It wasn't even that loud, but at night when everything else is quiet, it just started driving me insane. I spent a lot of time just lying there, staring at the ceiling and listening to Mason breathe next to me. He was out cold, obviously. And I'm just lying there, thinking about every single lie he's told me since we moved to Saratoga Springs. I didn't say anything to him. There was no point, he'd already decided. I was the crazy Anna like. I was just some bored housewife imagining things. If I kept pushing, he'd just use that against me. He'd probably tell people I was having some kind of breakdown. He doesn't really scream or fight, he just kind of slowly makes you feel like you can't trust your own brain. So I just played along. I made the coffee, asked about his day, nodded while he talked about some corporate merger. I was basically just acting. It was kind of like my old job in digital marketing, honestly, just creating a version of something that isn't actually real. I was just doing it in my own living room. On Thursday, Mason left his iPad on the kitchen island to jump in the shower. He's always been kind of careless with his stuff because he just assumes I don't care about his work. He thinks I'm only interested in HOA newsletters and grocery lists. I grabbed the tablet and went straight into his cloud storage. I already knew his password, it was just his first dog's name, and the year he passed the bar. He never even changed it. I guess he didn't think he had anything to hide. I didn't search for anything obvious like affair. I just searched for the name I saw on those envelopes. Skylar, there was a folder. It wasn't even hidden or anything, just called Project S. I opened it and I actually felt sick. It wasn't just letters, it was like a whole archive. Photos of them at some cottage in the Berkshires, and these restaurants in the city that we never go to. And then I found the documents. There was a lease for a one-bedroom in Albany. It was under some corporate shell company Mason set up 3 years ago. He wasn't just visiting her, he was paying for her whole life. He'd been moving money into this company for years, calling it business development or some other corporate bullshit. I read the emails. Skylar T. Rodriguez. She was a grad student he'd met while mentoring at a clinic. The emails were, I don't know, they were just hard to read. He didn't talk to her the way he talks to me. With me, he's the boss, the provider, the guy with the plan. With her, he sounded, I don't know, vulnerable. He talked about being scared of failing and how he hated his job and how she was the only one who got him. It was just so stupid. He spent 10 years telling me I was the only one who understood him, but he was using the life I built for him to go play a different character with someone else. I was basically just the one keeping the lights on and paying the taxes so he could go be authentic in a rented apartment in Albany. I spent an hour reading those messages. They'd been together for almost 4 years. 4 years of me wondering why he was working late on Tuesdays. 4 years of me changing my own career goals to fit his schedule. I found a thread from last Christmas where he complained about having to spend the holidays with me because of family expectations, but told her that one day they wouldn't have to hide. I didn't even cry, I just felt cold. Not like a heartbreak thing, but just empty. I realized I didn't even know the guy in the shower. The person I'd been married to for 15 years was just a character he made up to keep things running smoothly. I wanted to find the original papers for that shell company. I knew he had those plastic bins in the basement for archived case files. I went downstairs and it was freezing. The basement is a total mess, old gym gear, boxes of Christmas lights I've been meaning to organize since 2019. I started digging through a bin labeled tax records, 20,152,018. While I was pulling out a folder, I noticed the bin was full of old dried out rubber bands and those little plastic bread clips. I don't even know why he has a collection of used rubber bands, it's so weird. I actually spent a few minutes just picking through them, and I got this random surge of anger that he's keeping this garbage while he's paying for another woman's apartment. I threw the whole handful in the trash. It felt like a tiny win, I guess. Anyway, under the tax folders, I found a blue folder. Articles of Incorporation for Tesser Holdings, Tesser. T.S. Rodriguez. He didn't even try to be subtle. He basically named the company after her. The arrogance of it is almost impressive. He really thought I wouldn't look, or that I wouldn't be smart enough to figure it out. He treated me like a supporting character for so long he forgot I actually have a brain. I took photos of everything with my phone, bank accounts, dates, signatures. I felt like a spy in my own house. When I went back up, Mason was out of the shower, drying his hair. He smiled at Meth, that same practice smile he always uses. You okay, Olivia? You look exhausted. Go lay down, I'm fine, I said. I sounded far away, like I was talking from another room. Just a headache. See, this is what I mean, he said. He went into that condescending tone. You're overworking yourself, you need to relax. Why don't you take the weekend off? We could go to the lake, just us. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The expensive watch, the hair, the way he looks so confident because he thinks he's winning a game I didn't even know we were playing. I wondered if he felt bad at all, or if I was just like a piece of furniture to him, something useful that you just maintain. Yeah, sounds good, I told him. I didn't want to go to the lake, I wanted to burn the house down. But I knew the best way to handle him was to let him think he was still in charge. He loves having the secrets. If I took that away too fast, he'd just go into defense mode, and he has way more resources than I do. I spent the rest of the afternoon working in my office, but obviously I was just scrolling through divorce lawyers in Saratoga and Albany. I wanted someone who does high asset cases, someone who knows how to find hidden accounts. While I was searching, I started thinking about my 30s. I remembered when I decided to step back from my career. It was mid-August, maybe 10 years ago, when Mason became a partner. He told me the pressure would be crazy and he needed a stable home base to succeed. He made it sound like a team thing. If you handle the home, I can conquer the firm, and we both win, and I believed him. I just stopped doing my own thing because it didn't fit into his success. I basically threw away my 30s for a two-story house and a 401k I don't even really control. I spent a decade giving up my own life so he could feel like a big shot. And all that time he had Skylar. I wondered what he told her about me. Did he say I was boring or that I was crazy? Did he act like a martyr trapped in a marriage just to look more romantic? Thinking about her, the dress, the hair, the laugh, did even make me jealous. It just made me tired. I was just disgusted by how much of a waste it all was. Around 4.2, the HOA sent a mass email about winter landscaping. They wanted the perennials trimmed by the end of the month, or we'd get a $50 fine. I just stared at the screen. It was so absurd. My whole life is falling apart, and I'm still the one worrying about the perennials. I opened my legal pad and started a new list. Financial assets, real estate. Sear company, fraud. I felt something shift in my chest. I was still cold, but it felt more like a tool now. I once shaking, I felt clear-headed. I realized the stability he always praised me for was sent. Something he actually valued it was just something he used. He thought I was predictable and easy to manage. He was wrong. That evening, I made roast chicken and carrots. I used the good linens, I poured the wine. I played the supportive wife perfectly. The chicken is great, Liv, Mason said. Really, you've been in a better mood. I'm glad you're finally calming down. I am, I said, taking a sip of wine. I've had some time to think about us. He stopped eating for a second. I saw a flash of suspicion. He was looking for a crack in my face. And he asked, and I think you're right, I said with a little smile. I think I need to make some changes. I think it's time I started focusing more on myself, he beamed. He actually looked happy. He thought I was finally just accepting the role he wanted for me. That's a great idea, Olivia. Maybe that UX certification you mentioned? I think that would be a good hobby for you. I didn't correct him. I just nodded and kept eating. The heater started clicking again in the distance. I listened to it and imagined his face when he realizes that the stable woman he ignored for 10 years is the one who's going to take everything. After dinner, I helped him clear the table. I put the dishes in the dishwasher and wiped the counters. I did it all in silence. As I walked past him to go upstairs, I had this sudden urge to just scream or throw the wine in his face or tell him I knew about Albany. But I didn't. I just went to the bedroom and started picking out my clothes for tomorrow. I have a call with a lawyer at 9:30 a.m., and I want to make sure I look exactly like the woman he thinks I am, quiet and harmless. I called Sarah Jenkins at 9 a.m. on Friday. I waited until I heard Mason's car pull out and the garage door shut before I dialed. I was in my offices do freelance marketing, and I was feeling this mix of anxiety and anger. Mason always called my work staying busy, which was a huge red flag. Sarah's an attorney in Albany who handles the big divorces. She wasn't trying to be sweet or sympathetic, which I actually liked. She wanted the facts. I told her about the shell company, Sir Holdings. I had photos of the paperwork and the records showing the $40,000 he took from our home equity line. Then there were those consulting fees that I'm sure we're paying for a place in Albany. She was quiet. For a second he could hear her typing And then she told me that using marital funds for a second home or another person is called dissipation of assets. Basically, the court in New York can credit that money back to me. She was mostly interested in the shell company because it showed he was hiding things on purpose. I leaned back in my chair. My office is basically a freezer in the winter, so I was shivering while I processed this. I felt numb, like I was managing a project for a client I hated. I asked her what the next step was. She told me not to say a word to him. No hints, no fighting, no we need to talk, keep things normal. While I did that, she wanted me to gather every financial document I could find. Tax returns from the last 7 years, 401k statements, everything. She told me to find the combination to his safe and mirror any hidden folders on his computer. I looked at the list on my legal pad, and my head started to throb. I told her I could do it. She said she'd send the retainer agreement and we'd start the discovery process. Then she told me that if he noticed I was acting weird, I should blame it on something he already believed about me. Like tell him I'm stressed about the HOA or some health thing. Stay in the box, as she put it. After I hung up, I sat there in the quiet. I thought about how I always used to tense up when Mason came home, making sure everything was perfect so he wouldn't complain. I don't even remember when I started doing that, so I spent the next few hours searching. I went into the master bedroom and looked in the back of his closet, behind the suits. I found a little fireproof lockbox. The code was the date of his first big win, and Korth bragged about that date for years. Inside were deeds to some land in the Adirondacks he bought 5 years ago. I didn't even know he owned land. He'd mentioned investing in acreage once, but he made it sound like some boring retirement plan. The deed was only in his name. I took photos of it. My hands were actually pretty steady. It felt wrong. Later, I checked our joint retirement accounts. I handle the spreadsheets, but Mason does the actual investing. I logged in and saw the portfolio had changed a lot over the last 18 months. He'd moved a huge chunk of our growth funds into low-yield bonds. It didn't make any sense for us. I started matching the dates of those shifts with the transfers to Sire Holdings. It was obvious he was using our shared future to pay for his secret. He wasn't using extra money, he was dipping into the safety net. He was stealing from our retirement to pay for a grad student in Albany. I didn't scream. I felt this heavy weight in my stomach. He didn't even respect me enough to leave me with my own security. He figured I'd never check the numbers. That evening, the house felt oppressive. I spent the whole day acting like a forensic accountant, and now I had to go back to being the supportive wife. Mason got home at 6:30. He looked tired. He threw his keys on the tablia sound that used to make me jump, but now it was just a noise. Rough day, he said, loosening his tie. I'm the only one who knows how to do anything around here. The board is breathing down my neck. That sounds stressful, I said. I was in the kitchen stirring some risotto. I tried to keep my voice light. Do you want a drink? Yes. Double scotch, please. I handed it to him, and he paused, looking at me. You're being very quiet today, he said. Everything okay? I gave him a small smile. Just a headache. I think the weather is changing. I spent a while cleaning the pantry, and I think I overdid it. I'm drained, he chuckled. It was that condescending sound he always makes. The pantry? You spent your day cleaning the pantry? Honestly, Liv, you need a real hobby. I keep telling you that UX course would be great for you. You need something to focus on. Maybe you're right, I said. I didn't look away. I'll look at the dates tomorrow. He seemed happy with that. He patted my shoulder as he walked into the living room. That's my girl. A little bit of direction is all you need. I watched him go and thought about the shell company and the land in the Adirondacks. He really thought he had me figured out. For the next few days, I played the part. I became the most compliant version of myself. I asked his opinion on things I didn't care about. I complained about the HOA rules for hedge height. I even acted excited about the lake trip he planned for the weekend. It'll be good for us, he told me, leaning over the counter. Just a few days away from the city, no phones, just the two of us. I think it'll help you get out of your head. I nodded and smiled, then emailed Sarah a PDF of the Adirondacks deed. I spent my mornings talking to Sarah and my afternoons pretending to study for that UX certification. I actually bought the books and left them open on the table. ID. Highlight random parts about user interfaces while waiting for Sarah to call me back about the money. One Tuesday, while Mason was at lunch, I went through the guest room closet again. I found a small leather ledger in the pocket of an old winter coat. It was a list of dates and amounts. Beside each one were the initials S.Tr. He was keeping a manual record of the payments. Some were for rent, some for tuition, and some were misc. One from 3 months ago was $4,000 for an emergency. I wondered what the emergency was. A car accident? A medical bill? Or maybe just a new bag? The thought of him rushing to save her day with our money made me feel sick. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at his handwriting, that precise cursive. I remembered our early years, like when he surprised me with Paris for our 5th anniversary. I used to tell my mom he was the most attentive man I'd ever known, but I guess he was just good at acting. He liked being the hero, the provider. I'd been the audience for 15 years. I took photos of every page. Just as I was finishing, I heard the garage door. I shoved the ledger back in the coat and walked into the hall. "I'm home," he called. I met him in the foyer. He seemed energized. He hugged me, and for a second I felt this wave of disgust. I wanted to push him away and show him the photos, but I didn't. I hugged him back and asked how his lunch was. "Productive," he said. "I think we'll close the deal by the end of the month. I might get a bonus. I was thinking we could finally replace that old dishwasher. I know it's been acting up." "That would be nice," I said. I thought about the dishwasher. It had been leaving a weird film on the glasses for months. I'd mentioned it a dozen times, and he always said I was doing it wrong. Now that he felt powerful, he suddenly cared about the appliance. That night I lay in bed and listened to the heater. I looked at Mason, who was already asleep. I felt clear. For years I'd been terrified of divorce. The stigma, the money, starting over at 44. I told myself a flawed marriage was better than no marriage. I traded my freedom for a two-story house and the idea of stability, but the stability was a lie. There was no safety here. I was living with a stranger who saw me as a utility. I started thinking about how to leave. Sarah told me to wait until the discovery process was further along, but I knew I couldn't stay here much longer. I needed a place. The next morning, I drove into the city. I looked at some small condos, modern, secure, just for me. I didn't want a yard or a heating system that cost a fortune. I wanted a door I could lock from the inside. I found a one-bedroom near the waterfront. It was expensive, but based on the numbers, Sarah had be fine once the distribution was settled. I didn't sign yet, but I put a refundable hold on it. When I got home, there was a message from the HOA on the portal. Someone was getting threatened with fines because their trash cans were left out too long. I spent 10 minutes reading the comments, watching the neighbors bicker. It was so petty that it actually made me feel better. Mason came home later with lilies. "What's this for?" I asked. "Just because," he said, kissing my cheek. I realized I haven't been the most present lately. "I appreciate everything you do for this home, Olivia. I really do." He sounded so sincere that for a heartbeat I almost believed him. I almost forgot about the ledger and the woman in the olive green dress, but then I smelled his collar. It wasn't his usual peppermint and cologne. There was something else's, something floral and sweet. I didn't flinch. I just smiled and put the lilies in a vase. "Thank you, Mason. That's very sweet." I spent the rest of the evening making a roast. I chopped the carrots and potatoes slowly. After dinner, he talked about the lake trip again. "It's a secluded place," he said. "Right on the water. No neighbors for a mile. Perfect for us to disconnect." I nodded and sipped my wine. I wondered if he was planning to use the trip to fix me, or if he just wanted to feel like the perfect husband one last time. "Looking forward to it," I said. When he went upstairs, I went to my office and sent a final email to Sarah. "I have the ledger. I have the deed. I'm ready to move. Let's coordinate the filing for the Monday after the lake trip." I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The wind was rattling the pane. I noticed a smudge of grease on the counter, so I took a cloth and scrubbed it until it was clean. Then I turned off the lights. I lay in bed next to him, listening to the house. Settle, I thought about the woman in Albany. I wondered if she knew about the shell company, or if Mason told her it was all his own money. I wondered if he told her I was unstable, or if he didn't mention me at all. I wasn't jealous, I felt kind of sorry for her. She thought she was the one who got him. She didn't realize she was just another project. Mason didn't know how to be real. He only knew how to manage things. I closed my eyes and imagined his face when he got served the papers. The next morning, the house was freezing. Mason was already dressed in a gray suit. He gave me a quick kiss on the forehead and said he had an early meeting. "I'll be home by 6, he said. "Pack your things for the weekend. Don't forget the heavy sweaters." "I won't," I said. After he left, I went to the laundry room. I found one of his navy blue socks behind the dryer. I looked at it for a second, then dropped it in the trash. I didn't feel like putting it in the hamper. I didn't want it in the house. I spent the rest of the day in silence packing my bags. I didn't just pack sweaters. I packed a folder of documents, my passport, and the details for the secret bank account Sarah helped me set up. I looked at the beige trim on the walls, the color he insisted on because it was timeless. I decided the first thing I'd do when I left was make sure I never saw that shade of beige again. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for 6 pine.